Ms. Appleton-Cairns, my name is Richard Baker. Can I begin by offering a space at the start of my questions for reflection? I represent a number of families whose children were murdered or attacked by Lucy Letby. Do you feel on reflection that the HR process and the way in which you managed it contributed to a delay in bringing Letby to justice?
No, I do not.
Even with the benefit of all that you have seen and heard, you don't think that your actions contributed at all to a delay in bringing Letby to justice?
No, I do not. I think that the grievance procedure was an opportunity for the consultants to bring forward and explain in more detail what their concerns were and any evidence that they had. And there was nothing in that grievance that they brought to the attention of somebody who was independent, an independent chair.
Well, I think you have already been asked questions about how independent that process was. But can I say this? This was a process that was designed to pander to the whims of a serial killer, wasn't it? The grievance process, with the benefit of hindsight.
I don't believe that.
Do you have any skills or experience at all that permitted you to understand or interpret the clinical issues in this case?
The what? Sorry?
Did you have any skills or experience that permitted you to interpret the clinical issues in this case?
No.
Would you agree you were entirely ill-equipped and unqualified to investigate murder in a healthcare setting?
Yes.
Can we look at your witness statement, please, and to paragraph 17, which I think sets out your first involvement? It's a reference to a meeting on June 30th, 2016, which you attended 2 neonatal unit action planning meetings.
Yes.
And they were meetings arranged to provide assurance to the executives as to how the situation on the NNU was being handled in light of the increase in neonatal deaths.
Yes.
So, that was a meeting that was attended only by yourself and the nursing staff.
Okay.
Well, that's yes, isn't it?
Yes.
You have already said in evidence that you at no time went to speak to any of the consultants who were making allegations against Lucy Letby. That's correct, isn't it? That's what you say in your witness statement.
Yes.
So you approached this issue by having a meeting, on the face of it, about these issues with the nursing staff, but didn't seek to balance that by speaking to any of the consultants. Why was that?
I was asked to attend this meeting. It wasn't my meeting.
Well, no, that's, I'm sorry, not a very good answer, because you have made various assertions in this inquiry about the evidence that was being presented to you, as to the quality of the allegations that were being made by the consultants.
Yes.
Now, if you say before the inquiry that the evidence was never presented to your satisfaction, then I think it's important that you justify your approach. So you spoke to the nurses. You never spoke to the doctors.
There was no evidence presented to me at all, by anybody.
Well, I'm sorry. We are going to come on to a note in a moment where you make assertions about the quality of evidence that was available. I think it's quite a simple point. You spoke to the nurses, but you never spoke to the doctors. Why not?
Because the doctors would only speak to the executives. And I knew Ravi. I knew Ravi quite well.
Are you saying the doctors refused to speak to you?
The doctors didn't speak to me. You would have to ask them why they didn't speak to me.
No. Are you saying that you sought to speak to the doctors and they refused to speak to you?
No.
Okay. So the answer is, you didn't seek to speak to the doctors, did you?
No.
No. Now if we go on please to INQ 0101934. This is Mr. Pace's note of a conversation with you. Now, you have been taken already to a section that says, Dee is satisfied that there are no malicious issues involved. This is July 5th, 2016, and I think in response to questions from my learned friend, you appeared to question whether you used those words by saying, this is Mr. Pace's note.
That's correct.
Can you look, please, at paragraph 30 of your witness statement?
30?
Yes, paragraph 30. Would you like to read that out, please?
Yes. At this stage, I was satisfied that there was no malicious issues involved. I was copying it from Ian's note.
Right.
My understanding was that there was only one person pointing the finger at Letby, and that was Stephen Brearey.
Okay, so if you could stop there.
However, he had not provided any evidence to support.
If you could stop there, please.
Sorry.
So in quoting "no malicious issues involved," you don't seek there, do you, to say, "those weren't the words that I used"?
It's in italics, so I was quoting those words.
Yes, but where in this paragraph does it say that those are Mr. Pace's words and I didn't use them? It doesn't.
Well, if it carries on, if I could continue to read that paragraph.
Does it say in that paragraph that those weren't your words?
No.
No. If we could go on, please, to read the next sentence.
My understanding that there was only one person pointing the finger.
No, sorry. We are going back to the telephone note.
Okay.
If we could go on, please, to read the next sentence of the telephone note.
I asked Dee how she can be sure.
I'll read it. I asked Dee how she can be sure, and she said that she did not think there would be any such issues. Now, what does that mean?
This is Ian's note. I don't know. I can't remember.
I explained that really the employment aspects of the matter pale into insignificance, taking into account potential issues involved, especially if those who are working on the ward, and including consultants, are pointing the finger at each other, and the suspicions that the death rate could be attributable to one in particular individual. Now, isn't that describing a conversation between you and Mr. Pace, wherein you are reassuring him that you are satisfied that there's no substance in these allegations, and him saying, well, whether there are employment issues in this case or not, pale into insignificance if there's any reality to the suggestion that there is a murderer in this unit? Isn't that the interpretation?
Well, I think the interpretation is that he explains that the employment aspects of the matter pale into insignificance, taking into account potential issues involved, especially if those who are working on the ward, and including consultants, are pointing the finger at each other, and the suspicions that the death rate could be attributed to one in particular individual.
Well, doesn't this bring us to a key issue in your interactions with this case, that employment issues are of nothing compared to the seriousness of a potential murderer on this ward?
I would agree.
So, in permitting this grievance process to proceed, you would accept, wouldn't you, that you did so based upon incomplete and uninvestigated facts?
No, because there had been the coroner who had looked at each of the deaths, and the chief executive had brought in the Royal College of Paediatricians.
Sorry, which?
We had had that report.
Which coroner? Sorry, you keep saying things in your evidence that I'm afraid don't appear to have any reality to the facts of the case. Which coroner made a determination? In which case?
The coroners had gone. I was told that the coroner had gone through each of the baby deaths.
That's untrue.
Oh, okay. That's what I was told.
Who told you that?
I was told by the chief executive and also by Alison Kelly.
So, Ian Harvey and Alison Kelly reassured you that the coroner had investigated all of the deaths?
Yes.
And that there was nothing to be concerned about?
Yes. Well, no. They said that there was two where they couldn't be very specific about what the cause of death had been.
Right.
But they couldn't identify that there was foul play either, is what they told me.
And that's information that had come from the coroner?
Sorry?
That is information that had come to you, obviously via Ian Harvey, but from the coroner.
It wasn't Ian Harvey. It was Alison Kelly and Tony Chambers.
Yes, but they were referring to determinations by a coroner.
Yes, but they had also instigated the Royal College of Paediatricians to come in, who had already completed their investigation, and I was told verbally that there was nothing untoward within that report, and that's the only reason that the grievance went ahead when it did.
But you hadn't been told that by the date of your conversation with Mr. Pace in July 2016, had you?
I don't recall.
Well, no, because the investigation hadn't been concluded by then.
Okay.
Again, throughout the grievance process, Letby, via her Royal College of Nursing representative, advocated strongly that the consultants should be disciplined, didn't she?
He. Yes.
No, but it was Letby's representative, wasn't it?
Yes.
Finally, and I am conscious of the time.
But there was no chance that was ever going to happen.
No, but that was what Letby's representative was pushing hard for, that they should be disciplined.
There was nothing to discipline them on.
If you look at paragraph 75 of your witness statement, Letby was concerned that the consultants thought she was lying and said, "I have nothing to hide." I then said, "We need to compromise, as if you go down the disciplinary route." I did not think the disciplinary route in relation to the consultants would be in any way helpful.
Yes.
That is a reference because Letby was pushing for them to be disciplined, wasn't she?
It was her representative that was pushing. She wasn't pushing at that point. But there was, with a grievance, you are trying to find a way forward for everybody to move forward. Going down disciplinary route to me was just unimaginable because it would just be making things 100 times worse. So I would not ever have supported that. But I don't think she could have done anyway because there was no grounds.
No, but just to be absolutely clear, Tony
Millia
was the advocate, the RCN advocate for Letby, and he was pushing very hard for the consultants to be disciplined on Letby's behalf, correct?
That's what he said at the end, yes.
Yes.
Can I also just make a point, because I think this is important? It wasn't just Lucy Letby's grievance that came in. We also got an almost identical grievance in from the RCN separately, but they were both together. And so it was like a pincer movement to try and get her grievance heard. So one of the things that I did was to look at the commonalities between the two, so that we only had one process. So I was under pressure to hear the grievance. The grievance came in July, and it wasn't heard until December. But at that point we did know about the Royal College of Paediatricians report, and so it felt we couldn't hold it back any longer, that then it went ahead. But I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you and your learned friend that we could maybe have pushed it back further. But it's how far do you keep pushing it down the road? There was a lot of pressure from the RCN.
Well, what somebody needed to do was call the police if allegations like this were being made, because they are the people who are equipped to investigate it, aren't they?
Do you know what? I couldn't agree with you more. But I think the people who had all of the concerns and all of the evidence, they were the people who should have called the police. And there's no reason why they shouldn't have.
Well, that's a very judgmental thing to say, because you didn't interact with them and you didn't obtain their side of the story.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, my lady. I've got nothing further.